we have to depressurize the fuel rail system because we have to disconnect the fuel line from the intake area. What we have to do is go to the inside of the vehicle. We're underneath the driver's side dash. We're going to grab the lower panel and gently tug forward. We're going to disconnect the little plastic tabs and pop the cover off like so. So once the cover is removed, you can see access to the whole fuse panel. Now on the top of the fuse panel, we have 3 relays. We have a black one, a blue one, and a black one. The middle one is labeled as the fuel pump. This relay is the one that we want to go ahead and remove. So we're just going to use a pair of pliers here. You want to be careful, you don't want to crush it. Let's go ahead and grab that, and we're gently going to wiggle and pull it straight out like so. Next, going to open up the gas cap. This is just going to help us with the depressurizing, and just leave that open. Now we're going to go ahead and start the vehicle, and what's left in the fuel system should burn out, and then we're going to let it run till it stalls. So at this point here, there doesn't appear to be any fuel in the line system for the vehicle to start, so let's go ahead and move back out. We want to get our wipers to the 90 degree, and then we're going to shut off the ignition here. So let's go ahead and get these operating. With a flathead screwdriver, we want to go ahead and remove this cap right here. So we're just gently going to pop inside the cap here, pry it up gently, and then remove the cap. Using a 17mm socket, we're going to use an impact gun. You can use a ratchet or a wrench if you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and zip this off. Now when we pull the wiper arm off, you want to make sure that we put it back on in the same position as we removed it. That way there it's not too far down or too far up when it's in operation. What I'm going to do is simply take a piece of tape, and I'm going to put it right in line with the wiper blade. I'm going to fold over a tab so I'll be able to remove that easily and set that down. Now I want to go ahead and remove the wiper arm from the shaft here. So we're going to bring this up. We're going to gently start to wiggle back and forth and bring it straight up. This is on a spline shaft, so you want to pay attention to that. Once you have this off, I want to go ahead and repeat for the other side. Start by removing the battery. Disconnect the terminals. I'm going to go ahead and remove the bracket here. We'll go ahead and remove the J hooks, and we'll grab the battery and remove it from the vehicle. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and press down on this tab, wiggle that off, press these tabs out, and pull this harness off to the side. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop these little retainer tabs off, lift up and pull out. Reach in, grab your air filter, set that aside. Using a 10mm ratchet, we're going to go ahead and start removing the bolts here that secure the box. There's one here and there's one in the back. Now we're using a 10mm and a swivel socket with some extensions to go ahead and loosen that back bolt. And I'll reach down in there and pull that out. I'm going to go ahead and use a Phillips head on this clamp right here. Now what we're going to do is remove this front intake tube off of the airbox. I'm going to go ahead and start grabbing the box. There is a rubber grommet right here securing this in place. And what we want to do is lift up and work this box away. We want to pull this rubber intake hose off of this, as well as this tube right here out of this rubber grommet. I'm going to go ahead and remove the ECU, just kind of set it up. So there's a 10mm bolt here, and then there's two right here. Now we're going to go ahead and pull this box out. And now we're going to go ahead and pull the intake box out of the intake tube and this rubber vent port up top, like so. And we're just going to try and manipulate this box out of place. All right, using our 1/4-inch ratchet, 1/4-inch extension, and a 7/32 deep socket, I'm going to come around back here, and that's going to help us get to that hose clamp. A little bit of movement, but it's working. Get that moving. I'm going to pop off a couple of hoses in the back here. I have one on the back and a clamp. I'm going to pop that out. And we're going to go ahead and flex this intake tube. And I'll work it back and forth until we can pop that off. I'm going to use a flathead screwdriver to gently pry up. I'm going to work this back and forth. All right, and go ahead and remove that tube. Now I'm going to grab the hood to cowl seal. It just pressed on to the trim. Pull it off and set it aside. Using our trim tool, I want to go ahead and remove these little buttons right here. I'm going to pop these inner trim panels right here and repeat for the other side. Use our trim tool and go inside these little notches right here. As you're lifting up on the edge here, there's the same, you're going to disconnect a little clip right here that secures these two pieces together. Now I want to go underneath the cowl. I'm going to go ahead and use a pair of pliers here that are designed for removing hoses and whatnot. And this pinching is actually going to help us release the tabs on this clip. I'm going to pinch it and release it. Once you've released some of the tension on those tabs, you can go ahead and lift this unit up and away. All right, now that this is a little more flexible, I'm going to go ahead and work this trim piece up and out. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over and go ahead and disconnect the washer nozzle hose like so, and then set the cowl aside. We're going to go ahead and remove this stamped steel shield right here. There's a series of bolts holding it. There are two 12mm bolts and two 10s right here. Let's go ahead and remove those. Using a 10mm deep or shallow socket with an extension, I'm going to go ahead and get to this back bolt. Go ahead and remove the front. Down in the center, I'm going to use a 10mm socket and extension. Do the same for the other side. And go up and pull the shield out and set this aside. Now on the back side of the engine facing the firewall, you're going to have your fuel line right here. We're going to use a pick just to get up underneath the cover, and we're just going to pry up that little plastic shield right here and pop this off, like so. Next, what we're going to do is I'm just going to take a rag. You can use a paper towel, whatever you want. We're just going to tuck this up underneath the fuel line to collect any residual gas that might dribble out of this here. Now this green lock tab, there's actually tabs on each side of this here. We're going to use a special pair of pliers right here. We're going to pinch down on that. I'm going to go ahead and remove this line. Have a little bit of fuel dribbling out just to catch that. Now we're going to start disconnecting our electrical connectors and hoses from our throttle body. We're going to start with the first electrical connector up top. You want to press in on the little spring tab on the top, wiggle it, and pop that off. The next one is on the back side. You want to lift up on this rubber boot, and there's a spring tab on the other side. You can usually feel that through the rubber boot, but you want to press in on that and wiggle that connector. Might take 2 hands. And separate that unit. I'm going to slide that boot back on. Let's now go ahead and remove these 2 clamps here. Just going to use a pair of pliers. Bring that back. All right, so we did put a towel underneath here. This is a coolant tube. We're going to go ahead and remove this. Not a lot is going to come out, but it may dribble. Okay, you want to have a rag or something there. We happen to have some plugs, a various amount of plug sizes here. We can go ahead and just pop in here for now. So we're going to go ahead and pop a little cap in here. Now we're going to go for the upper hose. Going to use our pliers on this. Use this pair of pliers here. There we go. And we're just going to work this off. And you want to be careful because this is a plastic neck. You don't want to crack that, so be very, very careful when you have your hose, your pliers on there. You don't want to snap that off. Now there are 4 bolts holding the throttle body on. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to go ahead and use our 12mm socket and impact unit to remove that. Now I'm going to loosen the bolts completely, but I leave the bolts in place for now. I'm going to grab the side of the throttle body and gently apply some pressure. And we'll go ahead and work it away from the intake. Now there will be a gasket right here on the intake. You can leave that there, or you can take it off. You're going to have to replace this gasket. You may be able to reuse it, but anytime we do something like this here, it's strongly suggested you replace the gaskets. Now on the back of the motor, beside the intake on the passenger side, there's going to be a connector right here. It's a white or a light gray connector. I'm going to go ahead and release that. So you reach around to the bottom side of it, and there's a little spring tab. You're going to press that in, grab the connector, and gently wiggle it. And this should pop off for you, like so. On the back side, there is a hose here with a bracket that bolts to the back side of the intake. You can get access from the top side or the bottom side underneath the vehicle, but there's simply a 10mm bolt on the bottom side of this bracket. So we're going to go ahead and use our 10mm socket and a ratchet. Just reach around the back side. Break that free. So we'll go ahead and move that bracket out, and we're just going to thread that back in. Now we're going to go ahead and use our pliers to release this hose clamp right here. And just work it back. And grab that hose, just put a little twisting on it, and then while we're twisting it, we're going to pull on it and disconnect it. Now we're underneath the vehicle on the passenger side, rear bank of that motor, and there is a connector that we had already removed from up top, but there is a little plastic locking tab right here. We're gonna go ahead and try and use our needle nose pliers to try and pinch that and push that harness through. There we go. Now on the bottom side, we have a intake manifold mounting bracket right here. There's two 10mm bolts right there. We're gonna go ahead and remove those using our ratchet and our socket. And go ahead and loosen those up. I'm gonna go ahead and pop this hose out of this retainer clip and use your hose plier or your pliers. Bring this clamp back a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and use our pick to gently get underneath this line here just to try and break it free. I'm using a 12mm extension or a 12mm socket and extension with our ratchet. I'm gonna go ahead and get into the back here. I'm going to go ahead and do this for the remainder of the intake bolts. We have one last harness right here to remove from the intake, so just press down on that tab. You can use a pick if you have to. Gently lift up on that tab and wiggle that harness off like so. Now we'll be able to go ahead and grab the intake, gently wiggle it, separate it from the engine and just pull it back. And the knock sensor is located on the back side of the engine block underneath the intake manifold. So what we want to do now is go ahead and disconnect the electrical connector to it, and then we'll go ahead and remove the knock sensor from the block. Now the connector has a little press tab on the back side. We're just going to press that with our finger and grab the connector, wiggle it, and pop it off like so. All right, we're going to go ahead and use a 27mm socket and a ratchet. Get onto the sensor here. Once that's loose, I'm going to go ahead and remove the ratchet and the socket. Should be able to reach right down in there and spin that out by hand. Now we have the new knock sensor. We're going to go ahead and get that threaded in. And we're just going to spin that in as far as we can. With the torque wrench on there, we're going to go ahead and tighten this to 23 foot-pounds. Now if the sensor is installed, we'll go ahead and reconnect the harness, and you'll hear an audible click once that's locked on. Now before installation of the intake manifold, you want to pay attention to the rubber gaskets. Now most of the time, these rubber gaskets around each port are reusable. You want to check them out, inspect them at your discretion. If you want to replace them, great. We do highly recommend that you do replace them at this time, but if they all look good, What you can do is simply just take a rag or a paper towel, just wipe them down, make sure that they're clean all the way around the perimeter, because that is what's going to be sealing your intake to the engine. Now in our case here, we have replacement gaskets. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and replace the old ones. We're going to use a pick, just grab the little tabs, pick underneath if you have to, and go ahead and pull these out. And go ahead and pull them all if you're going to be replacing them. So on installation, you want to watch that there is a tab on the top and it fits right into the notch on the intake. So go ahead and line it up with that tab and simply just press the gasket in as it goes around. And repeat for the other gaskets. All right, next I'm going to go ahead and lift the intake. I'm going to go ahead and get ready to reinstall this. There are two studs, there's one on the top here and one on the other side. I'm going to get the intake hung back on those two studs. All right, we're going to go ahead and get the nut started right on the back here. We'll spin that down and get that fully seated. Just going to snug it by hand. I'm going to go ahead and install the nut on the other side. All right, we're going to go ahead and torque all of these nuts and bolts down to 17 foot-pounds. And we're going to start from the center and crisscross our way outward to the outer nuts. So we're going to start in the center bolt here, crisscross, go to the passenger side outer bolt, driver side outer bolt, and crisscross back and forth. All right, on the bottom side of the intake manifold, we have the mounting bracket. I'm going to go ahead and get our 2 bolts mounted in here. Get a few threads started, and then we'll go ahead and snug those up. So now while we're underneath, we're going to go ahead and connect this little green connector that snaps into the notch on the side of the intake right here. And now we're going to go ahead and connect this gray connector here. You hear an audible click and you know it's locked on. So on the back side of the intake manifold, we had installed this bolt right here just to remind us that that's where the bolt went. I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and we're going to get that bracket mounted for this hose. Once you feel that bolt start to tighten up, just snug it and then just get it a little bit tighter there. Just tighten up a little bit there. I'm going to go ahead and get this back hose on the intake. Slide that on. Grab your pliers and work that clamp up back into its original position. Now I want to go ahead and connect the fuel line. You want to make sure there's no debris on the end of this fuel line here. Check the end here for any garbage. This green connector, little tabs, should line up with the clip hole on the top. Just press it in and it snaps on. I'm going to go ahead and take our plastic cap here, line this up, and we're going to press this in on top. I'm going to go ahead and pop our injector cover back on here. It just has these 3 little posts and there's rubber grommets. Simply line that up. And press those in. This connector here slips into this injector cover clip, and then we'll reconnect this connector. And you'll feel it and hear it click into place once it's locked in. Now on the back side of your throttle body is the base where the gasket is going to seal the throttle body to the intake. What we're going to do is take some parts cleaner, spray it on a towel or a rag, and we just want to wipe the surface to make sure that that is clean and there's no debris or anything there, so that that gasket makes a good seal. What not to do is spray all of this with a parts cleaner and soak it. Now before installation of your throttle body, you'll have your mounting bracket right here, and this slides in right into the back. Then we're going to take our throttle body. We already put on our new gasket. Take our throttle body, put that in a position, and we'll take one of our bolts, get that started, and we're going to do that for the other 3. Using our 12mm socket and ratchet, we're just going to go ahead and snug these down. I'm going to go ahead and torque down the throttle body bolts to 17 foot-pounds. I'm going to do this in a crisscross pattern. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall these 2 hoses. We're just going to use the pick to pop out the little caps we had put in there, the plugs. And we'll go ahead and do the same for this one here. Next we'll use our pliers, move the clamps down into place. Let's go ahead and reconnect the harnesses. We have this connector here. Just line it up, press it down, and you'll hear it click into place. Take this connector and plug it in to this upper port. Like so. I'm going to take this upper hose here and connect it to this plastic port on the top of the throttle body. Slide that down. And take your pliers, and we're going to move that clamp down into place. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our lower shield. This forward mounted bolt is a 10mm. These 2 are the 14mm. Get these started by hand. And then there's one in the back here that is a 10mm. I'm going to go ahead and use our extension and socket to help get that lined up and started. And we'll continue to the other side. Then we'll install our last 10mm bolt in the back center over here. Now I'm going to go ahead and torque down the 10mm bolts to 7.2 foot-pounds. The 12mm bolts are going to be torqued to 16 foot-pounds. Next is our cowl cover we're going to go ahead and install. On the bottom side of it, you want to pay attention to the plastic clips here. And these clips are going to line up on the body in these notches here across the front. The cowl cover is going to seal across the base of the windshield. We're just simply going to go ahead and clean this up and do this across the whole base. It's just going to make it for a better seal for that cowl cover. I'm going to go ahead and bring that on over. Bring the driver's side in, and let's bring this in under the gasket. So for ease of installation, we separated these two components in simply two little snap clips right here that pop in here, and we just pull them apart and separate it. So that's going to make it easy for us to install this end cap. So you have your windshield washer nozzle here. When installing this cover here on the corner, you want to make sure that it runs through this notch right here. Okay, so we want to go ahead and install the corner cover and then feed that through and clip into there. If you don't do that, it's going to get stuck underneath and you won't be able to snap the cover down into place. So now that we have the flexibility of the wiper hose, the pinholes are lining up here. I'm going to go ahead and get that plastic clip installed at the base of the windshield there. Now I want to go ahead and reconnect the windshield washer hose. So I'm going to bring that together here, push that in. I'm going to bring the cover down on top. Now while we're lining things up here, I want to make sure that the plastic pins are lined up across the body, and I'm going to go ahead and bump those down into place. I'm going to reinstall our push pins. We're going to use this large one on the fender trim. Here's a small shiny button on the inboard one. I'm going to repeat for the driver's side. We'll install our last push pin right in the top center. We'll go ahead and install our filler caps. Place these lower tabs on the inside. Line it up. Snap in the tops. I'm going to go ahead and install our cowl seal. There's a groove on the bottom that slips right over the top of the plastic here. Simply line it up, press it down, and work your way across the front. Now, when installing the passenger side wiper blade, you want to go ahead and slide the top of this unit over the spline shaft. When we pull this apart, we had used a piece of tape to line up the wiper blade to make sure that that lines up. So we want to go ahead and slide this down, line up the wiper blade with that tape line. You should be able to work that back into place on those splines. And we'll go ahead and get that nut put on. I'm going to go ahead and torque the wiper arm nuts to 21 foot-pounds. So install your wiper arm caps. There's a little tab here. You want to install that first, and then press down, and it'll clip into place. Let's go ahead and reinstall the air filter box base here. Okay, once we have this in the general area, we'll be able to go ahead and slide the air intake tube onto the box. At the same time, we want to go ahead and get this metal tube onto the intake tube as well. Kind of a twofer. Get that put in. All right, now that we have these two tubes lined up in the general area, let's go ahead and kind of drop this down into place. I want to make sure that that rubber grommet pops onto that metal stud there. Make sure that these two pieces are joined properly up top. Again, drop that filter down inside. So we're going to simply grab our Phillips head screwdriver, and we're going to go ahead and tighten up this clamp. And you see that rotated on us a little bit. So I'm going to try and bring that back. If it has rotated on you, you can go ahead and grab a pick, reach down in there and just grab that clamp and spin it around just like that. Use a one hand to hold it in position. Go ahead and tighten up that clamp. Grab the box. You want to go ahead and get this part of the upper portion on the rubber boot. Push it straight back. The box top should snap on. Let's go ahead and get these bolts on the front portion and that back bolt. Let's now go ahead and install the two air box intake bolts. There's one in that back here. We're going to work our way back here and get that installed and get it started a few threads. Let's go ahead and get the front bolt on. And we're just going to go ahead and snug those down. And repeat for the back bolt. Let's go ahead and connect this lower air intake tube. Now with the ECU in place, let's go ahead and get the 3 bolts installed. Get these threaded in, and then we'll go ahead and get these tightened up. Let's go ahead and put this together, get the harness clipped into the top, and install, and you hear it click when it's locked into place. Let's go ahead and lower down our battery tray here. Which might go in a little bit better this way. And we'll go ahead and get our battery installed. Go ahead and we're going to put our J bolts down. There's one on each side, hooks there, and one on the other side. Go ahead and tighten these bolts up. So both of them hooked, you can pull up a little bit on that handle. I'm going to go ahead and snug these down. You just want to snug it up so that That handle doesn't have any slack left in it. And there we go. Now let's go ahead and get the terminals hooked up. Get your negative on there, pop the positive on. And then we're just going to use our 10mm wrench to go ahead and snug these up. Reinstall your gas cap. Reinstall your fuel pump relay. Make sure the tabs line up. Make sure it's seated properly, nice and tight. Now have your under dash cover. You want to take these little plastic insert or tabs and put them into the notches in the dash. So now that we have the car back assembled, we have the knock sensor installed, what we're going to do is go ahead and turn the key 2 times to go ahead and prime the fuel system. 1, 2. Now we're going to go ahead and start the vehicle. With the vehicle running, we want to go ahead and check for any check engine lights, anything like that that might indicate that something is not connected or something isn't working properly.